Welcome back, everyone. I'll just do a quick introduction of our panelists today. We have, down at the end, we have Benny Walker. So Benny is a Yoda Yoda singer-songwriter whose recent offerings Save and Oh No You Don't shot to #1 on the AMRAP charts, the latter earning him 4 NEMA 2006 nominations and the award for Best Aboriginal Talent at the Age Music Victoria Awards. Benny has performed alongside some of Australia's finest, including Archie Roach, Alex Lloyd, Blue King Brown, and Tim Rogers. Welcome, Benny, with me.
Thank you.
And next to Benny, we have Olympia, otherwise known as Olivia Bartley. She is one of Australia's most relentlessly original artists. The 2 studio albums from Olympia, Self Talk and Flamingo, were released to international critical acclaim. Self Talk 2016 was nominated for an ARIA Award, shortlisted in the Australian Music Prize, and selected as Triple J feature album. Recent tours have included Anna Calvi, Julia Jacklin, Garbage, and Fred Armisen. Please welcome Olympia. Next to Olympia, we have Thando Sikwila, Australia's first lady of R&B, who has commanded massive crowds at festivals such as Blues Fest, Womadelaide, Groove in the Moo, Big Sound, Jungle Love, and Woodford Folk Festival. You may also recognise Thando from her time as a contestant on Season 3 of The Voice. Thando has also supported huge international acts such as Leon Bridges, Maxwell, and Alan Stone, as well as collaborating with Remy and Sampa the Great. Please welcome Thando.
Hello.
And last but definitely not least, we have Barney Mccall. Barney is a Melbourne-based pianist and composer who is a truly international artist. Barney has received a Grammy nomination, an ARIA Award, and multiple Australian Jazz Bell Awards. Born and raised in Australia, he has spent years working in New York and has performed and recorded with numerous international and Australian artists, including Sia, Aloe Black, Hiatus Coyote, Daniel Merriweather, Gary Bartz, Dewey Redman, Billy Harper, and soul greats Fred Wesley and Maceo Parker. He was awarded an Australian Council Fellowship in 2007 and the Peggy Glanville Hicks Composer Residency in 2015-2016. Please welcome Barney. So I'm going to get started with a general question. We'll start with Benny down the end. But could you all tell us a little bit about who or what inspired you to get into music and how you all got started?
For sure. I just want to also acknowledge how intimidated I am by all of your bios. I grew up in country Victoria, actually also southern New South Wales. I'm from Echuca Moama. I'm a Yorta Yorta man. And both of my grandfathers were musicians. One was a pedal steel player, so there's a lot of obviously country influence come from there. My mum's dad was a jazz saxophone player, so I was a drum teacher, and my dad played guitar for as long since I can remember, obviously well before I was around, and so there was an influence obviously very heavily there. Dad was into a lot of blues stuff, rock stuff, played in cover bands a lot when I was a kid, and a couple of his sisters sang. My mum's one of 12. Good Catholic family with no television, obviously. And a few of them played different instruments. And I started going to piano lessons at the age of 8. And I'd like to think I was blessed with a fairly good ear, much to my teacher's frustration, because she would teach me a song, and it'd be something we all know, you know, a nursery rhyme or something, and I'd just find the first note on the sheet and then just work the rest out, looking at the key, like listening and looking at the keys. And so that lasted 2 years. I remember turning up to some lessons. I'll be sitting there trying to work things out, and turn around and she's knitting, just bored with me, and I was bored with her, so I went and did guitar instead. And as I said, I had dad and my grandfather at my disposal, so I fell in love with blues pretty early on. And the actual songwriting thing, I think, probably came from the Nirvana Unplugged in New York album. My auntie gave me that when I was really little, but I'd started playing guitar, just open chords and stuff, but thankfully that's pretty much all they were using on that record, so I was able to, like I said, use my ear, use the few chords I knew, listen to that stuff. And then, because I had to get an acoustic guitar, and back then a tape deck where you could record yourself, and then if you had a double, you could do some overdubs. Kind of got into it from there, and through high school and stuff, played in heaps of different bands. There was never kids my age in my year level, so it was always older kids, my sister's friends and stuff. So I was the annoying little brother playing with all her mates and being poorly influenced by them. But yeah, went on to, sort of came full circle, went through like a metal stage and came back to the acoustic guitar and back to the blues. And I think thankfully I got to go through a lot of those different styles of music, and I was influenced by different things, and I think it shows on pretty much anything any collection of songs that I've recorded, like albums, because it does vary. It's always rooted in the blues, but there's some pretty strong influences throughout there in other styles.
Amazing, thank you. And Olympia?
So I grew up when I was a kid in a evangelical Christian community, cult, sect, whatever you want to call it. And I only say that because I'm not a Christian now, so no judgment either way. So that's how I was brought up, much judgment. But it's important for me musically because in a church community, you know, it's sort of practiced from the pulpit not to hide your talent under a bushel. And then some people thought they had talent that didn't have talent, because you've got to support a lot of people who can't sing. And it's an important part of who I am as a musician because I wasn't listening to what we call secular music, the radio. I didn't have any rock idols. I definitely wasn't allowed to. But music was egalitarian, meaning anyone could try. Like, you know, playing the spoons would be accompaniment. So that is a big part of who I became musically, just bumbling my way through it. And I was thinking, listening to Dave, the most important thing for me, and I am at my best, personally and professionally, when I am the most open and the most curious. And sometimes, you know, here it's really challenging to remain open, and I know I'm jumping ahead, because you're extremely vulnerable. And you're talking about Nirvana. I remember playing Reeperbahn in Hamburg and putting on MTV Unplugged on a jukebox and nearly getting into a fight because I was thinking, wow, Nirvana. I mean, I'm talking like 5 years ago. So I'm still really excited by music and art and ideas. Anyway, I'll go back. So remain open and curious. So, learnt instruments sort of by ear, was taught piano as a kid, you know, didn't like it. Ended up picking up the guitar. I saw Dead Man, the Jim Jarmusch film, which Neil Young made the soundtrack for. And what happened is they just put up lots of screens for Neil Young, and he stood there with his guitar amps and just made a soundscape to that film. And it changed my life. And that's why I started to play guitar. So self-taught, maybe pursuing the guitar like it's a piano, you know, doing both badly but my own way. And that was my musical journey, and started to write songs very much in isolation. Grew up in Wollongong, moved to Melbourne, but still very much in my own bubble, lest I be disturbed by learning what contemporary music was. And then one day, an artist called Lenny Lane, who was quite big at the time, went to Twitter and was like, why does no one care about this artist? And in one day I had managers, booking agents, and major labels banging down the door like a movie, and I had no idea what any of these were, so I had to learn quickly, a lot. So yeah, that's sort of my origin story.
Wow, thank you. And Thando, how about you?
I grew up in Canberra, so I sort of had my start singing in church. I feel like I'm a giant cliche because I've got the whole gospel thing going, and then obviously transitioned into more popular music. I also grew up on a really healthy diet of the Disney Channel, all those artists on the Hollywood Records label, Demi Lovato, Selena Gomez, the Cheetah Girls. A lot of what I've sort of become as an artist is sort of based on the simplicity but the beauty of pop music. So I've allowed myself to be genre transcendent, and I don't want to put myself in one particular box. My vocal stylings obviously come from that gospel, R&B sort of roots, but as far as my writing style goes, I've gone anywhere from hip hop to rock to, you know, I've explored a little bit of country, but I haven't actually let people into that yet because it's all very much still in development. But I have been so lucky to be mentored by a lot of incredible artists, and I still continue to learn, and a lot of my growth as an artist has come from being completely open-minded. So it's all still very much a work in progress, and being able to collaborate with musicians whose musical style challenges a lot of what I know, i.e. Barney, has definitely been a journey into figuring out who I am. So yeah, Disney Channel.
Yeah, me too. And how about you, Barney?
Well, I grew up in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, and as a very young child, I knew that I needed music to make sense of the external realities. And I used to play for hours. I used to play, and I would look up, and the sun had gone down, but I didn't know that it had gone down because I was playing all these games in my head at the piano and making up ideas. And I had these games like aliens were coming to Earth, and if you could play piano, they wouldn't destroy you. And just these crazy games. But what was actually going on, I think, was this sort of ritual that I think all of us went through as young people, as children, where we discovered the powers of music and what we could do with it. And you do like an almost shamanic ritual, I think. All of us have done that, where we get in this zone. And so I just continued and just loved it so much. And then I went to the College of the Arts, where I studied jazz. I'm primarily a jazz pianist and composer. I also write songs and lyrics. And when I was at the college, I was doing things that all college students do that make them not good and make them, their higher selves get destroyed by these things that you do. I'm sure you understand what those things are. But Doug DeVries, who's a fantastic and one of my mentors, a guitarist, heard me playing and said, Vince Jones, the jazz singer, trumpeter, is looking for a piano player, and I think you're ready. I wasn't ready. But when I got on the stage with those guys, it was like, oh, discipline is freedom. There's amazing things you can do. So I didn't go to the pub anymore. And then I really went in hard. I went to New York and lived there for 20 years, to be brief. I traveled around the world with a lot of amazing people, and I'm so grateful because I took in so much, and now I'm just back here sort of putting out, and I'm trying to return to that original child place. So I know a lot of theory and stuff, but I'm actually trying to dispense with that and actually express this immediate unconscious expression of music. So that's where I've arrived back. I've written a lot of complex music, but I'm kind of happy to be here again. So that's kind of my vibe.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. And this is another question for all of you. Where do you tend to draw your inspiration for writing, and is it mostly based on personal experience? We'll start with you, Barney.
Well, I've got a fantastic quote which works so beautifully here that I read recently by Leonard Cohen. And the quote is, "Poetry is just the evidence of life. And if your life is burning well, then poems are just the ashes." And I think that's so beautiful and sums up what is a transmutation of your life. So you get to experience things, and I think the best music that we hear is really a direct transmutation or sort of expression of your whole life. So if you live a lot, then you might have more songs or something. I suppose that's what I would say.
Yeah. Great. And Thando, how about you? Where do you draw your inspiration?
Definitely agree with that. I can't write about something that I've never lived. Otherwise, it just comes across very contrived. And I've tried to write about stuff that I've just never experienced, and it's always very apparent, not only to me, but to my audiences. So I've always sort of steered away from that. I think it's really important to be able to be authentic in what you create and what you put out. So I always feel like the best inspiration comes from lived experience, for sure.
Great. And you, Olympia?
I actually have 1.5 hour workshop about this later, so
don't give too much away then.
And 101 slides, so whoever's coming, bring your notepad. But I will tell you one story that I won't cover this afternoon. So I'm really inspired by everything. I'm a sponge, and I love to jump into things like, I was trying to buy this wetsuit this week on Gumtree because I've decided that I definitely want to be a surfer. Right near the airport, there's this sort of like indoor surf thing, but this week they had a medical incident and they've closed it down. So lucky that that wetsuit didn't come through. But anyway, I think ultimately it's personal and it has to mean something. And I always imagine that my songs are like knuckle busters, like it's something you could pick up. And I know we're all talking about essentially love and what it means to be human, but I'm always trying to find, okay, what's a new way of saying it? And like Dave said, ultimately a successful song speaks to someone else. So here comes the challenges though, right? Like I'll listen to a lot of podcasts, and I heard this great interview recently with these 2 Italian kids that built radio systems above their roof. I wish I had written down the facts. But anyway, so this is during the cosmonaut, the race for space, right? So Russia and America. Okay, we've gone back. Okay, you really got to stick with me, okay, on these stories. So what was happening is they had these radio towers above their house that their parents encouraged them to build, and they could pick up the sounds of cosmonauts because, you know, the space race was in the newspaper, and they were hearing things like they heard the dog that went to space. They even took the recording to the vet who confirmed, yes, that's not a human heartbeat. But then they heard cosmonauts dying, to be frank. I mean, you can hear all these interviews, and there's one where there's a cosmonaut coming in through the atmosphere, and they're saying, something's going wrong, we're burning up, you know, we're going too slow, the world will never know about us. And these kids are like, looking in the newspaper, like, it was not reported, because obviously Russia had to keep that pretty stum, and then Americans successfully got to space, and the cosmonaut program shut down in Russia. But there's all these recordings, you can hear that. And when I heard that recording, I thought, I mean, don't we all have love stories where they're so private? And you think, yeah, the world is going too slow, and the world will never know about us. So what a gift. And you will only find things like that if you search, and if you read books that no one's reading, and if you watch the documentaries and do the work, then you will find these ideas. So I'm really moved by that. But the challenge for me is constantly to bring it back. Okay, well, 50 words and make it relatable. And so, yeah, that's what inspires me to write songs.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting. And Benny, how about you?
It's interesting that story just told, because I was that child. And I have a song about it. No, I agree with everyone. I have maybe 10 slides, and one of my slides is about this. Write what you know, because it's so, as Thando talked about, it doesn't. You can tell, like, it's in a very simple way. I think especially I know I can tell when I've written something, I look back and I go, it's so cringy and corny and it's just shit, basically. So then for me to write something from my heart, especially since becoming a dad, that's been easier. Not to say that there weren't experiences I'd written about that were deep and things that I really had to work through from a personal place, and they're the songs that mean the most to me, the ones that have really gone deep. May not be the ones that are the most popular on Spotify or whatever, but they're the ones if I play them live, especially solo, back to that place where it's just an acoustic guitar or piano, and I gotta be careful not to go too far if it's something that was pretty tough too. I know I've found myself right on the edge a couple of times. Sometimes I went over the edge, but to me that's kind of what it's about. Like, it's an expression of ourselves. I don't want to express someone else's experience. It's too special to me, writing a song and performing it, to not try and make that connection. And I think that's what we're all looking for, aren't we? And that's our way of doing it. Our way of doing it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you can definitely tell the difference when someone's being authentic on stage. So on inspiration, Barney and Olympia. Barney, you've lived and worked in the Big Apple for years, as you mentioned. And Olympia, you grew up in the coastal town of Wollongong in New South Wales, and you're now based in Melbourne. Can you both tell me, starting with Olympia, how much does your location affect your songwriting and overall style? Do you have a preferred place to write? And do you find inspiration from writing in different places?
For me, and it's very much based on your personality, but I thrive in isolation, and I thrive as a songwriter when I'm bored, and it is so hard to be bored nowadays. I have all digital locks on all my social media, so they just time out, and the ABC News, but it's a real challenge. But my best work has come from when I've been absolutely bored, and that has nothing to do with where you live. If anything, when you live outside of a metropolis, you've kind of got an advantage for the writing, and that's when you can really have ideas that are so original. So that has really helped me, but it is personal. I mean, I'm kind of an introvert that can be that extrovert, and you need that as a performer. But I give me a Friday night at home with books, or Netflix. But so that's me. I just quickly wanted to say one thing about the other point. Benny sort of inspired me to remember it. Is I heard this New York poet say, "You can't write about what's out there until you write about what's here." So you can't write about the cosmonauts, guys, because I haven't written that song yet. But yes, you can. But you can't write about that and it be authentic until you face. Sometimes there are things here that you're avoiding. So Inspired Anywhere. I carry journals. I buy really expensive journals. I will swear a little bit. It's not necessarily because I'm a wanker. It's because I want to take it seriously. Like, I show up for my practice, and I consider myself a 9-to-5 writer. Like, I will go and work even if there aren't. I don't believe you wait for ideas. Sometimes you can think, what's a verb? And try to list it. There's technical stuff you can do. So I have journals. I'm a nightmare tenant. I have stuff stuck to the walls. Yeah, write everywhere.
So did you find that the change in scenery moving from New South Wales to Victoria, did you find that had an impact on your writing style, or do you think it was more just, the years going by and growing up and changing?
It was funny. It's more who you are as a person, how you develop. Where I grew up was very rough, and a lot of really rough things happened in my life, which have shaped my outlook on the world, which then shapes me as an artist and how I write. But then I grew up in Canberra for a while and saved enough to buy a car because there's nowhere to go out. That also shaped who I am as a person. So, it hasn't been where I've lived. It's been more, experiencing life, going through heartbreak and challenging and making mistakes and learning. That has more shaped who I am as an artist.
Great. And Barney, how about yourself? Do you find the process of writing and inspiration really different, being in New York versus being in Australia?
Yeah, I mean, it's all just this long process, but I definitely deliberately went to New York to find out who I was, in a way. And I had some hard things happen to me personally. And I was like, what is this whole world? I'm going to go to the hub of it and find out what's going on. Simultaneously, I'm pushing all sorts of buttons that I didn't know were within me. And I definitely wrote a hell of a lot of music as a result of the stimulus of being in that big city and being around people and ideas and music that I had no idea about. That was like, oh, actually, I kind of like that. So it was definitely very kind of influential. And I love what Olympia is saying about she's got locks on her internet. And this friend of mine in New York is this really heavyweight jazz player, and he practices a lot. And he said, man, I got this new app on my computer, and it just shuts down so you don't have to get distracted by the internet. And I said, man, what's it called? He said, freedom. And this is really important today because, and I want to talk about this also in my workshop, especially for young people. They're so bombarded with the external and streaming rates, which are meaningless, and all these people who aren't real, doing all sorts of unreal things. And all these things are getting in the way of your actual music. And I love this idea of, this mentor of mine said, if you listen deeply enough, you can hear the future. And it says, right this way. But we can't listen because the external stuff is so kind of noisy, and we miss out on who we really are. So I think that's a really important point, because the external is not important. The internal, as everyone has mentioned here, is where it's at. So in terms of where I live, I did deliberately take a lot of things in, but it's just this long process.
Amazing, thank you. This question I'm actually really personally excited to hear about from everyone. You've all worked and toured with some incredibly talented, huge names. Which of those experiences was your favourite and why? We'll start with you, Thando.
I really, really have enjoyed working with Sampa. That was a huge sort of thing for me, seeing someone who, I guess in this industry, and these things are gradually changing, seeing someone that looks like me, someone that can relate to me, my upbringing culturally on a scale like that, and to be able to collaborate with. I did some writing with her, recorded on her album The Return, and it was incredible to have the opportunity to grow in my artistry, because I'd never written like that before, I'd never sung like that before. So being able to share stages with her in that way as well was not only incredibly affirming, but I guess also part of my growth as an artist, and helped me sort of believe that all those things I wanted for myself as a little girl to be as an adult, as an artist, as a performer, were very possible, and they were happening. And she's also just an incredibly connected and humble person, and values community and uplifting people within our community, and giving them a platform. So I've been very, very lucky to work with her in that capacity, and that's also sort of inspired me to do the same. And I've taken on a mentorship role in a lot of my arts practices, and I'd like to work with a lot of younger artists and sort of help them harness their artistry, their songwriting, and to give them the opportunity to explore in a non-judgmental space, and to give them the tools that they'll need to sort of go out into the world and navigate and figure out who they are with no fear, because that's what she gave me, no fear, to just try things and not care that things don't look cool or don't sound a certain way, and break down barriers and break that glass ceiling. So Sampo has definitely been a favourite collaborator of mine.
Amazing. And Benny, how about you?
There's probably a couple of ways. I was just thinking about answering this. Obviously, you've been lucky to share the stage, and even the studio, with someone like Uncle Archie Roach. Just as a storyteller, not only on record, but just to sit and talk with him is just an experience. When he talks, I don't know if anyone's been lucky enough to have a conversation with him, but you're having a conversation, and he closes his eyes when he's speaking, and you can just say everything is coming from this really deep place with him when you talk to him, and that's always something I'll cherish, and those moments, and being able to do some vocals on a record, and been lucky enough to share the stage with some other great artists. But I'm most excited about the people I get to share the stage with every time I do a band show. There's thousands of good musicians, millions of good musicians in the world, but finding fantastic musicians that are great people as well and the right fit as a group, like chemistry as a group. Like Tina and I both have a guy named Christian play guitar in our band. He's not only one of the greatest guitar players, and he's actually, I get him to sing in my band. I don't know if you've got him doing that too, but he's a beautiful singer too. But he's one of the most lovely guys. And then the guy that plays drums in my band, I remember one of my favourite Australian guitar player would be Jeff Lang. And I remember going to watch him when I first started doing festivals. I was watching him play, and not only was I blown away by him, but his drummer, Danny McKenna. And it was explosive just watching these guys. I think it was, first time I saw them was at Chuka Blues Festival, but then not long after that saw them at Woodford, and just absolutely just blew my mind, and watched them for years. And then, met them just doing tons of festivals and gigs and through other friends. And then Danny's now playing in my band, which is really cool to kind of, every time we play a show, it's just awesome. I love and throwing Danny solos too. Like I'd just let Danny solo for an hour on, and just that would be the set. But it's not what we're hired for. But no, that's a real joy. Again, the guy that plays keys in my band is a great artist in his own right, and has a band called The Meltdown. His name's Simon Burke, and he is amazing. And I'm so lucky. These guys are all just amazing in their own right, and I'm so happy that I'm the worst musician on the stage when we get up as a band. I get to enjoy the show. It's I'm just happy to write the song, stick my name on the poster, and just hang out and jam with those guys. It's just such a joy.
Amazing, thank you. And Olympia, how about you?
I do that too. I'm not saying that you're a bad musician, but my bandmates definitely carry me on stage. And now I play as a session player for other bands, like something for Kate and Blake Scott, and I'm like, oh man, got to print all the lyrics out for this band. What? Okay, back to the question. So who've I toured with that, when you start out, I had this idea that every band I played with would just be like instant best friend. But it does just, I hate to break the bubble, it just doesn't always happen like that. Like, that band might have jet lag. I know when I played with Anna Calvi, they needed all the green rooms for her to sleep. Like some artists are really protective about jet lag or, their preparation. And it's really important to manage your expectations. But then I have had really fleeting moments with bands and lifelong friends, but it has just been completely unexpected. Toured with Julia Jacqueline around Europe. I've also headlined around Europe. Just quickly, what Dave said about age. Age is definitely a thing in Australia, but is not a thing overseas, right? You go overseas, music is not an age thing, right? Everyone goes to gigs. Everyone comes to your gigs. Everyone goes to other gigs. It's just an Australian dumb thing. But probably similar to Benny, one of my favourite gigs was playing at Golden Plains, and I know Hoodoo Guru's talked about Meredith, the same festival. It was life-changing, and the most nervous I've ever been is Midnight Oil used one of my songs as their walk-on song on the Great Circle World Tour, so it got played something like 360 times, and they started their tour in Canada, and people were sending me videos on social media all around the world, through the night. And then, so I had a ticket to see Midnight Oil at Sunshine Coast at the Big Pineapple. I'm not sure why I didn't buy a ticket in Melbourne. That's how nervous I was. And I was sober, but as soon as the song played, I, nearly got kicked out for acting like an idiot. But that's the most nervous, because I thought surely they're sick of that song by now.
What track was that?
Smoke Signals, yeah.
Awesome.
But yeah, no one believed me it was my song in the audience. Very rude.
Barney, how about yourself?
Oh, there's a lot, and as I said, like, it's a long process, but I'd love to tell this quick story about one of the first gigs I did with Sia. We played in Detroit, and it was in the daytime, Amy Winehouse had died, and I suppose they were friends, and I was the musical director, and she started bawling in the middle of the song, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, are we going to skip this song, because we're running tracks and everything, and it's kind of this hectic thing, but we got through the gig, and she was really upset. And because we got through it, we were like, oh, we're celebrating. So Sia said, I'm going to go back into the bus. And we all had a few drinks downstairs at the bar, and we were like, oh, that was great. We got through it. Looks like this tour is going to be cool. And it was pouring with rain outside. And then after, an hour or so, we decided to go into the bus. And there was Sia in her back part of the bus, covered in like a drowned rat, holding her doona up because the water was pouring into the bus. And then one of the players had to get on the bus and there was a hole in the bus, and the bus was completely soaked. And she was so good-natured about it. Like, she's so kind of just like a normal person, but it's like she switches over when she's performing, and it's like this whole other thing, like she's possessed. But in terms of, working with someone like that, like, just so good-natured, and so, I think psychic maybe too. And so that Sia was a huge influence, and because I got to, as a jazz musician, suddenly was touring all these festivals and listening to all this different music that I never would have gotten into, it really changed my whole direction, and I started making more pop music and writing songs. And then, just two other quick things. Gary Bartz, who's a saxophone player who I worked with for 15 years in New York, who worked with Miles Davis and Art Blakey and all these amazing people. Just playing with him, and then him soloing and playing some amazing stuff, and everyone, yeah, it was amazing. And it's like, who's this dude? What do you got? And so you have to have something. So I had to draw it out of myself, and I always have that now. I have the access to that. And then lastly, people, writing music and having someone like Thando sing it, or other people in my band. I mean, as everyone said, like, there's nothing better than that. Like, what an honor, And if it works and it's sounding good and it gels and there's chemistry, I mean, that's what it keeps me alive, honestly.
I can't imagine how that would feel. Thank you all for that. Thando, I have a question for you. Your time on The Voice must have been really exciting, and you blew all of the judges away in your blind auditions. What was it that made you choose Keith Urban as your mentor out of all those artists, and what was it like working with him on that journey?
Keith is a legend. Without taking anything away from the other coaches, I felt again, in my artistry, I had a real opportunity to actually challenge myself and to grow. It's not an experience I would recommend for everybody. I think you really have to be able to separate who you are as an artist and who you are in the real world from the television show, because it's not a music show. It's a television show. It doesn't matter what you sound like outside of the show. It doesn't matter who you've worked with. It doesn't matter what tours you've done, what stages you've been on. They don't care. You're there as a character to fill whatever stereotype they have sort of put on you. And this season I was the mum. So everything came back to me being a mum, trying to strike a balance. And I had to take it for what it was so that I could stay as long as I could. So I really played the game. I made it to the end as Keith's finalist, which was super dope because I had no sort of expectation that he would take who ended up being the only pop singer in his team. There were 12 people in his team, 9 guitarist, acoustic singer, songwriter, country type musicians, and then myself and 2 other girls who were pop singers. So I didn't expect to make it to the end with Keith, and the fact that I did just sort of, whether it was all sort of predetermined or not, who cares? I went and I did the best that I could in singing a whole bunch of different styles of music. So, I started off with a R&B pop sort of song, and then did some rock, and then did a Sia song in the end, and just sort of transitioned through all these different styles and got to show the full range of what my voice could do, and I guess my versatility as an artist. And I think coming off that show now, I've been able to sort of, I guess, reintroduce myself to the more commercial part of Australia's music industry and show that I have a lot of range as an artist, because again, it's not about sort of limiting what my offerings are as a singer. I don't want to just be known as an R&B singer. I want to be known as someone who can be quite versatile. That also reflects in my writing style as well. So, like I said before, I can sort of go from, doing the hip hop thing. I rap a little bit, just a smidge, to doing gospel, to doing jazz, to doing R&B, and just to, be very versatile. And Keith was awesome in that. Obviously, he's worked with a wide array of artists throughout his career, and his, I guess, openness to let an artist just be an artist and to nurture that was awesome for me while being in that environment, because obviously a lot of it's very controlled. Like, I didn't pick the songs that I sang, but he gave me the creative liberty to do what I wanted to with those songs. So knowing that I had that freedom and that trust in him as an artist, as a mentor to, change the arrangement of a song or change my melodic, approach to it. In my battle round that I had with this one singer, the song that was picked was very much sort of geared for him to take out the win, because stylistically and the tone, everything that he was doing was like, this is his win. And I didn't know where I stood in that song. So he allowed me to stand in my power in sort of the gospel sense of things and really take that arrangement, change the melodies, make it Thando's version. And I think that was one of the most incredible experiences that I had on the show, was having someone who is there, I guess, as another character. All the coaches fill a particular role on the show, but I really got a genuine sense of who he was as an artist and as a person, because all the best advice that I took away from him and all my learnings from him were off camera. And there's so much that goes into it that doesn't obviously make it into the episode that you see, but a lot of that mentorship off camera was so incredible, and I've taken away a lot from the experience. I knew that I didn't need to do the show. I didn't need to go on The Voice. I knew that. But I knew that if I was going to put myself in that environment, I had to get something out of it. And coming off it, I've just got this fire in my belly now, and now I know that there are no limitations to what I can do as an artist, which is what really excites me about being here today, and obviously getting to know some of you through my workshop. It's just about not limiting yourself based on what you look like or what people think you're going to sound like. The most exciting thing is breaking down those barriers, and we developed a really great friendship out of that, which is awesome. So
beautiful. Thank you for satisfying my Keith Urban fangirl. Benny, I have a question for you. How much does your heritage as a First Nations person dictate your identity as a musician? Have you found that has always been a positive, or have there been times where you felt that has become an obstacle on your path to success?
I've been asked this question a lot of times. And I think I have a new answer today, only because of things we've been talking about too. And I think we all write from our experiences, and I only know my own experience as a person, and I don't know what it's like not to have my heritage. Obviously, my history comes from lots of different places, but obviously speaking to my Aboriginality, and the way I suppose it would influence my writing is again through my experiences, which have been both positive and negative. I've got a song called Undercover of My Skin, which is about my experience as an Aboriginal person with lighter skin, and some of the things I've heard people say, because they don't think in their mind there's only white people standing around, and it's not that it's ever comfortable for me now, but it used to be so hard to deal with. In the way that I used to deal with it, I played a lot of sport growing up. I'm a reasonably big person, 6'2", high 90s. I used to handle things differently to what I do now that I've matured, and I think that experience now, I know the way I handle that experience now is through conversation. It still takes me a few moments to unjumble my brain, because it's like when you experience racism, it's like when you hear a bomb go off in a movie and it goes, "Fear." It's just like that. It's like you see red, you can't think straight, and then you deal with it. Now I deal with it, like I said, through conversation, but it's really, really difficult, but it's taught me a lot about myself, because I've always, I grew up with a dad with a very short temper, and I think I inherited that, but I've worked on it, and now I have 3 boys of my own, and I'm very, very conscious that a lot of the things that we become is from the environment we grew up in. And the way so I'm getting a bit off track from the question, but I'm working my way through this, then I'll come back. But so it's affected my songwriting, I think, in a way that it's let me express myself, like with a song like Undercover of My Skin and other things I've written, as well as we spoke about before, our experiences in life are what informs our songwriting. And I guess it's kind of hard. I can't really pick every little bit apart. Is that part of that song because of my heritage, or you know what I mean? Like, did I experience something that way or perceive it that way because of my heritage? It's really hard to kind of answer. There's probably there's obvious ones like Undercover of My Skin where I addressed it directly, but it's only again from my own experience. And you know what it has done, I suppose, which now I grapple with a bit too, is it's given me some opportunities as a musician to play great shows, because I've been allowed to play on the Indigenous stage, or I get to go and do multicultural festivals. There's those great events through the year, whether it's Reconciliation Week, NAIDOC Week, or the list goes on. But now some major festivals, I think it's less like that now, only the last couple of years, but it was there was me and Dan Salt used to kind of have conversations around. It's like the Blackfella stage is we're all over there sort of thing. And it's like the artists on that stage can mix it with anybody, not only in this festival, but across the world. And I think Port Fairy was the first one I noticed did a really good job of eradicating that. And it's just they have a healthy, diverse lineup, but they're all kick-ass acts. It doesn't matter all that other stuff. It's just just put on a good show. It's it's a very interesting thing. And I think I've seen it change. I'm 37, but even in my lifetime, I've seen a massive change. And I often think about what my grandfather saw in his lifetime. He lived to 90, And, he grew up on it. He was born on a mission. He was a shearer. Him and my grandmother were the first interracial couple to marry in my hometown. My grandmother had to give birth on the veranda of the hospital because she had Aboriginal babies. To then go, you look back and I had this conversation with Archie Roach as well about looking back. When you're working your way up the hill, you sometimes got to look back and see how far you've come. Doesn't mean you stop the journey, but it's just gives you some perspective. I know that was a very different answer than you probably expected.
No, thank you for sharing. Thank you, Benny. Barney, a question for you. So you've worked as a creative director, as part of a band, a solo artist, collaborator, writer, and you've worked in numerous different projects. Do you have a preference when it comes to what part of the process you're involved in? Is there a hat that suits you best?
Wow. Yeah, thank you. On some level, a person that gets paid is what Olympia said. On some level, I just got an email today. Someone said, hey, it was through my website, and it said, hey, Barney, I'm Alex, blah, 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 whatever. I'm making a new album. Wonder if you want to be part of it. And there's no mention of money, and it's like, I don't know the guy, and I've paid my dues. So I just wrote back and said, I don't do any side person things anymore. I want to do what I do. In answer to your question, I think I conspired with myself at a very young age to make this whole trajectory of my life where I got to play with these amazing people and learned from them and built it all up. And now I don't give a damn. Like, I'm just going to make what I make and really, man, I love Laurie Anderson, who's a performance artist, one of my favorites, and she said she hasn't read anything about herself for 15 years because to read about herself is to subscribe to the idea that she has any identity, and also it will blind something that's inside. And so I've sort of taken, as I said earlier, I've taken in a lot of things, and I'm just wanting to just make the best of what I really feel, that I'm feeling with. It gives me goosebumps that I do. So I've done all those things, and I'm really, really grateful to have had them because they inform everything that I do now. But I suppose my answer to your question is, embracing what I really believe to be true and really holding true to that in this wasteland and all of the adversity that we face with all this external focus, and just trying to make something that I believe in. And it seems to be working.
It does indeed. I have one more question for Olympia. Excuse me. So you've touched on this a little bit. You've spoken about how your second album, Flamingo, required you to step way out of your comfort zone. Was there anything specific you had to do in order to prepare yourself to open up and share quite a personal journey through your music? And how did you find the response to the music differed from that of your first album, Self-Talk?
This is such a long answer, and no one has actually asked me. That's such a great question, and no one has asked me that before. So Self-Talk was, they say your first studio album is like, you have years of songs to draw from, and it's sort of the easy joy project. And then there was all this pressure, like it had been shortlisted for the AMP, and I had to go to the ARIAs, and I had gastro, and I was on all these like anti-nausea pills, and there's this room full of lollies, right? That's the cruelest thing. I couldn't eat any. But there'd been all this pressure, and we're talking about representation. There weren't a lot of young women that were playing guitar on the scene, which sounds so stupid, right? But that's it. You get lumped into these categories. So it was pretty exciting. People were like, I didn't know girls could hold guitars, right? And at that stage, I was practicing like 8 hours a day, and you think, man, I could have slept in a little bit more. Anyway, so the second album, what happened is, and I think Barney touched on it too, I got really into the theory, and even now, like, I love listening to other songwriters talk about their music, even if it's pop music, and like Max Martin and hook theory and melodic math. Like, I love it. But sometimes you can go too far, and I love that idea, and I've written it down, but I feel like I'm trying to go back to the beginning too. Like, there is a charm when you first start out and you're bumbling and you make mistakes. So I've learnt it, now I'm trying to shed it again. Back to Flamingo. So I wanted to make a concept album. There were things I learned making Self-Talk, and maybe there was a little bit of hubris, and I thought I had a platform, and during self-talk, and it's funny because my best friend, her dad, really wants to have dinner with me and discuss why my lyrics are so weird. And it made me think, what is Mr. Stuart Moore seeing? And Smoke Signals is one song where I'm like, these lyrics should not make sense to anybody else. And what was happening, when I was making that album, I made it at The Grove, which was a studio that In Excess built. Gary Beers built it, and it's beautiful. It's like Spanish, and there's a pool and a spa, and, I'm sure a lot of good times were had there. There was like fake fur on the walls. Anyway, very expensive. Come back to the story. But Silverchair made a video album there, and my brother, I've got a lot of brothers and sisters, but my brother was obsessed with Silverchair. And what I didn't realize is his life was falling apart when I was making Self-Talk. And he actually was, his life was going downhill, and he was living in his car. And he parked the car near the recording studio, but wouldn't answer my calls. Couldn't afford a heated campsite. And what was happening is we didn't know that he had been sexually abused as a child, and it was starting to come out. And my pop music career was triggering him. So that was Self-Talk. And when I look at the lyrics, they don't make sense to you because they're my family album, right? They are family stories about car crashes and jail and... I guess I didn't expect it to be so popular. So I get it, Mr. Stuart Moore. I'm happy to have dinner with you and explain all the metaphors. So with Flamingo, I thought, okay, I'm going to write a song through the experience, because that stage he's a full-blown ice addict, and he lives on the streets and he doesn't talk to me anymore. And he's very, very heartbroken by my music success. So every time I do well, it really damages him. And it's just fucking music, right? So you imagine you're in a studio and you've got this big budget with a major label, and you're like, oh my God, right? So there's a lot happening. So Flamingo was, and it's guitar fronted, and I wanted it to feel like this force. Like, when you're out and you're 3 drinks in and you think, I could do anything. That's how I wrote the album, trying to give him a voice without trashing him in the media. Now, the challenge was I brought out a guitar album in a time that guitar albums are not popular. The singing took months to track, and I'm an okay singer, but we pushed it like an Olympic sport. I mean, I could sing over air conditioning at the end of it, right? But Australians were like, it wasn't where their ears were at. So, I could do everything I wanted to do on my bucket list of this is the album I want to make. But you can come out the other side and everyone's like, I don't get it. And I get why they don't get it. And I'm okay with that. I'm still really proud of it. And I think it will stand the test of time. I just have to wait and be patient. But, I did learn a lot, and you have to see it both sides. And I'm coming back to the point of it, back to the question. So, and now I feel like I'm coming back to the beginning. And, sorry, I don't know how to finish that answer very well. But that's the sort of genesis of the 2 albums.
Thank you so much for sharing. We have time for some audience questions. Does anyone have a question for any of our panelists? Yourself, yeah?
I'll jump in just because I feel like I killed the room, so let me try and pick the party back up. One thing I will say is collaborate and play with as many people as possible, because musicians, I mentor a lot of young artists, and but how do I connect and how do I get a band? A lot of it for me has been word of mouth. So to be seen, go to those open mic nights, show up. That'd be one.
Barney?
So much to say. Do the work. Olympia talking about watching documentaries, reading books no one else reads, and you got other ideas. There's actually a fantastic series of books that I would highly recommend by a guy called Stephen Pressfield. One of them's called Do the Work. The other one's called The War of Art, and the one I'm reading at the moment is called Turning Pro. And all of those books talk about resistance and how resistance wants to kill you. It's not a good thing. And how your family and friends don't want you to succeed. But we love them. But they don't want you to succeed because then you change and you grow, and that shines a light on them not growing. There's a lot of deep stuff in this book, in his series of books. So I would read all those 3 books. They're quick and easy too. And just fighting resistance and not taking any, not paying attention to the external stuff. It does not matter. What do you know inside your heart? Internal is where it's at. And then make something that you know is really, really good. And that will be the microdot. That'll be the DNA of what you make.
Getting very real there. I love it.
I'm getting hyped up.
Yeah. And Benny, what about you?
I don't want to add too much, but anyone I've shared the stage with, or anyone that we've probably all shared the stage with that's super successful or whatever, doesn't happen by accident. So that do the work thing is just so important. It's not like they woke up one morning and fell out on the stage and just learned how to deliver an amazing performance or write an amazing song. It's a lot goes into that, and obviously that's why you're here. You're already doing these things. So.
And Thando?
I would say don't write music the way you think people want to hear it. Just point blank. Like, be true to yourself and what you think sounds cool. Like, who the fuck cares what anyone else thinks, really? That's when your best work comes out. Just, be true to yourself and don't worry about what anyone else thinks.
Love it. Wise words from everyone. Thank you. And yourself here?
Yeah, here you go. It's sort of a question for everyone, but for Barney mainly, like, what's your sort of practice regime to get to the level of you got to playing with those jazz cats and doing that sort of thing in New York? What's sort of your regime on a weekly basis when you're not touring or playing with other guys?
Well, as I said, as a kid, I already felt something like, man, I got to make something. And I've also got to deal with this outside world, and there was 7 kids, and it was mental. So I've already had this thing at a very young age. But when I got to play with these great players with Vince Jones's band, then I was like, oh shit! As I said, discipline is freedom. So that's 21. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to the pub anymore. And I worked 8 hours a day, and I went to Then I thought I was good here, and when I got to New York, I was like nothing, and I liked that. I want to be an eternal beginner. I liked being there because in Australia, like, oh, you're so great, amazing. No, it means it's meaningless. There's like kids who are 15. I say, can I have a lesson with you? What are you doing? Or I'll record someone's amazing piano playing and say, well, how are you thinking there? And I would make all these cassettes, bring them back to Muralbach where I grew up, and then I would take it through all the keys. I will say, just on a theoretical level, taking everything through all the keys will change your life because it'll teach you how to hear and put your music on through your instrument, not dump data. I don't know, I could get into a whole rave. These days I've done so much work that I don't practice that much. I learn pieces or whatever, but I did do 8 hours a day for a decade. And now, as I said, I deliberately had this, I conspired to have this trajectory where I took in all this inspiration, and now I can put it out. And I really sometimes feel that I'm, just on certain days when I'm playing, I'm actually directly speaking about all the shit that I've done. So I feel so grateful. And I would say, here's my tip for any musicians who are instrumentalists. Any song you like Ribbon in the Sky, okay, play any note on your instrument and then play that melody in whatever key you're in, and learn to play any note, any melody in any key. It's going to change your life.
Beautiful, thank you. And does anyone have anything to add to that? Or do you think Barney's really nailed it? Yeah.
It's been a minute.
Thank you.
You just in the scarf?
I can't speak on this because I did not stick to genres.
Thando, I feel like you've got quite a strong opinion on this, so if you want to take the reins.
I mean, it's good, especially when you're starting out, to sort of, maybe if you give yourself a genre as a framework to help sort of develop your artistry and to find a way to articulate your musicality, but definitely not to limit yourself. I mean, what is genre, really? If we really think about it, like, everything is so fluid. So I think maybe just pick a style of music and use that as your framework, but don't limit your ability to stretch in and out of it. I find jazz music is awesome for that because it sort of helps you explore a lot of musical ideas that you might not necessarily consider in, you know, pop or rock. But again, it's all very fluid. So yeah, I think pick a style of music that resonates with you just straight away, and then if you use that as sort of the meat and potatoes of how you develop, the gravy and everything else sort of comes together nicely after that. But yeah, don't lock yourself into any one thing, especially when you're starting out, because it might limit the potential of what you've potentially got. The potential of potential.
Actually,
Thank
could
you,
I just
Thando.
quickly add to that? I grew up listening to the Cranberries. I don't know if you know that band, and they're Irish, and all my first songs, I was suddenly Irish. Right? And every song was F major, A minor. You know, it's just exactly all their chord patterns. It's okay to go through your influences. Yeah. Please let those CDs never surface. But, you know, we find our feet eventually.
I've got to hear these tracks. I'm a big Cranberries fan as well. I think we... Two more. Beautiful. Yourself in the front?
In a world that like really pushes authenticity, especially with artists having social media profiles, what advice is there for songwriters who don't want to be artists? And so you need to find an artist who will take their spin on a work that they didn't initially create.
Barney, did you have any thoughts on this one to start off? Or?
I've talked to a lot of songwriters that who do exactly that, and I think, man, like how much I would save on photo shoots. Like that is smart, right? Not having to perform the work. But how do you remain authentic? If you can just keep working on your songwriting craft and get to that place we're all trying to get to, where universality, like that it connects to other people. I mean, that's your authentic voice, but that'll be your edge. It doesn't matter who sings it. It will still come across. And there are great songwriters, even in this country alone, who don't perform their own work. Yeah, I can definitely connect you to some if you're interested, but that's what I would.
I'll quickly jump in and say the ability for an artist to interpret music that they haven't written themselves, like it's a whole art in itself. So that's why I will always look at vocalists like Whitney Houston or Beyonce, who we know don't write a lot of their own stuff, but in the way that they interpret it and perform it, it's so convincing. You think, oh my gosh, wow, that's a whole life you've lived. This is an experience you've had. That comes from an authentic place of writing. So if you're able to be in a collaborative space with someone who you believe can interpret what you've created in the most authentic way, whether they've actually lived that experience or not, but I think having that connection, especially during the creation of that music, is a really great way of sort of, I guess, making sure that you're on the same trajectory with what the intention of that song is and what the performance of that song is supposed to be. I speak on this from a place of, obviously once I got to the end of the show, I had to release a single as an original on The Voice, and I didn't write the song, and that was a really weird thing for me because I've never put out anything that I haven't written for myself. But I had to find what my truth in that song was. And it was very much a song that sort of churned out by the machine. Like, if you listen to the song, you're like, okay, we get what this was for. But in every opportunity I've had to actually perform it, I've had to sort of put my experience and what way I truly relate to it and how I connect to it to be able to give a convincing performance. And there's not one person that's come up to me after I've performed the song and said, oh, that sounds like a TV show song. They've really believed that it's a song that I've written. And I believe it's because the connection that I had with the songwriters in that session and connecting with them and finding out what the intention from them was when they were writing it definitely helped us come to a sort of, what's the word? Connection of, well, pardon? An arrowhead, yes. So that we both sort of knew what the intention for the song was supposed to be. Collaborating is a really important sort of way to do it. I think a lot of people that I've worked with will sort of bring an idea to the table and you just sort of find where you sit in it and then you help complete the picture. So yeah, a lot of networking opportunities will be good for that as well, because I'm sure that there are songwriters in here who won't necessarily want to be the performers of that music, but it's just about trusting the artist that you have in mind to sing it. Will be able to do it justice in that way. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you so much for that. I think we've got time for one more question. Izzy?
Hey, just had a question more about software you guys use and how important you think it is as a songwriter to be able to keep the stuff in demo form. More just what software you guys are using, and it's just a little bit more on
absolutely crucial. I tell all of my students and all of the people that I know, learn a program. Doesn't matter. Logic, Ableton, Sibelius, Pro Tools. Why? Because Skrillex doesn't know what a C minor chord is, but he changed the face of things with his internal music and made this whole thing, out of dubstep, or the scenius, as Brian calls it. All the people in dubstep, that's the scenius. But I always cite Skrillex, like, he's a brilliant musician. He doesn't know any chords or anything, right? Who cares? And one of my main ways that I've made 20 albums, and the way that I've done it is that I make drafts, and I take them away from the computer, put them on my phone or on a cassette in the old days, and I listen to them, and then all the different Barneys can go, oh, I like that, or that chorus has to go, or whatever, and I'm using all the different me's to sort of adjudicate the draft, and then I'll go home and I'll fix that in my software, and I'll make the new draft, version 3, version 7, and that way, by the time I get to the studio, I know how everything works, how it all matches up. And so I think for young people today, everything's changed. I came from a time when we had to learn theory, and there's all that, and that's all good, and there's creativity and craftsmanship in that. But what's the music? And to get to music is to have the computer allows you to get to a lot of music inside yourself. It's incredible. You're crazy not to be making. You can make a whole album on your laptop today.
I wanted to quickly jump. I'm so sorry, Ali.
Go ahead.
I'm not music program literate at all. I use GarageBand on my Mac to do my demos for my band. I use the piano roll to put together my chords, come up with my chord progressions, do a little bass line, use a drum loop, whatever, and then I hand it to the band, and then I let them do what they want with it. But they've got the intention and what I'm wanting it to sound like, and then sort of let it grow organically from there. I think unless you're sort of doing music production and you really want it to sound the way that it needs to sound as a finished product, I wouldn't say that, proficiency in a DAW is essential. I think if you're able to use it to articulate your ideas and then let them grow, that's also a good way to do so.
Yeah, I have a similar thing. I generally write with a guitar or piano, a notepad, and a voice recorder on my phone for the writing, because I get distracted too easily. I'll start going, should have this drum beat, and I'm not that good at producing that side of things. But I can hear in my head what the song sounds like. I think if you want to interpret it to your band, or I'll do a demo up to pass on to a producer or the band in pre-production, because I'm excited about it because I can hear what I think it should sound like. So I'm trying to get that across to get them excited about it, so they'll come and play on the record or produce the record or whatever. But and I've done it in co-writing sessions where you click with someone, you're both writing, you're flying along, and you're like, all right, now we need to make sure everyone else understands why it's exciting. So then you do a bit of that, the demoing with a bit of the, I use Logic. It's just a step up. It's like the Logic step from GarageBand. I think it's virtually the same thing with a bit more shit. But yeah, I basically probably still use it like GarageBand, but I just paid for it.
Thank you all so much for your input. We're going to have to wrap it up there. I just wanted to say thank you to all of our amazing panelists. You've all been so generous, and it was incredible to hear all your stories. You're all so interesting and accomplished, and I'm sure that every single person here has taken something away from this session. So I'd like to give them all a round of applause again. Thank you.
Thanks.
Benny Walker, Olympia, Thando, and Barney Mccall. Thank you very much.